So what do Canadians think about this memorandum of understanding signed between Ottawa and Alberta? Angus Reid Institute decided to find out. Let's welcome Shachi Kurl, president of the Angus Reid Institute, for that. Thanks for joining us today.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So overall support for the pipeline potential is strong, at least at this stage. What was the number?
Well, there's the national number and then there's the regional number, and they tell a couple of different stories. I mean, in one way, you could look at the macro, the micro, and the super micro. At the national level, you talked about that strong support. 60% of Canadians say that they could support the idea of a northern pipeline between BC and Alberta. One that, even though David Eby talks about, I could support a pipeline, just not with tankers, one does then wonder how the stuff gets out to the sea. However, in British Columbia, you see that level of support is at 53%. So it's a slim majority. It's just over half. It does represent a really significant change in the number of British Columbians who would support a pipeline project over the last decade. It used to be in British Columbia, opposition to something like this was really massive, and it really crossed the political divide. In BC now, what you see is there's a lot more support among right-leaning British Columbians, a lot less support, in fact, downright opposition among those who would vote either federally for the Liberal Party or for the NDP provincially. Again, that's David Eby's base. Now, when you look at the level of opposition on Vancouver Island and the North Coast, really that part of the province that would stand to be most affected by the potential of a spill, that is where you run into a brick wall of opposition. So overall, just because the country wants it doesn't mean that the regions in British Columbia that stand to be most effective are supportive. They're not.
Okay. So that makes sense when you parse it out that way. What do BC residents have to say about the tanker ban itself? Do some of them support lifting it for this project? What did you learn?
Again, you don't have majority support on lifting that tanker ban, except for in the parts of the province that are furthest away from the coast, so the BC interior, which tends to tilt more right-leaning in terms of its politics. However, you do see, there's about 40% who either say, overall in the province, who say, look, either make an exemption for this one project or lift it altogether. But if there is a hurdle to clear for Ottawa, if there is a hurdle to clear in terms of public opinion and public perception, it really is on the issue of that tanker ban, because in BC, overall, the majority view at this point is to leave that moratorium in place.
All right. You also looked at Canadian sentiment about foreign investment, and there's a lot going on here right now. What did you find?
Well, on that front, again, caution, I think, is the story of the day when we ask Canadians nationally, what are the two things that are, of these two things, which one is the most important to you? Is maintaining Canadian sovereignty over critical resources. So that's not just minerals, but it is things like oil and gas, it's things like potash and other critical resources. Would you prefer to see that sovereignty remain in Canada, even if it takes longer for private investment dollars to then be found to invest in the development of those resources? Or should foreign ownership be allowed? And again, here Canadians are really tilting towards keep that sovereignty. And, now we're talking about a lot of different resources, and we're talking about a lot of different companies that are vying for potential ownership. Obviously, we're talking a lot on your channel and in other places around, for example, the Anglo-Teck merger. Well, that's a British company. People are perhaps more aligned with, okay, if there is a situation where there is foreign ownership, some countries are more acceptable than others, but a lot of concern over U.S. Investment in critical resources, real concern over Chinese investment in critical resources, and overall, a tilt towards saying, look, if we're going to invest, they should be Canadian dollars.
Interesting. All right. Very enlightening. Always good to take the pulse of Canadians and how they feel about these big potential movements. Shachi Kurl is the president of the Angus Reid Institute. Thank you for joining us. Appreciate that.
Thanks for having me.